The result of population turnover was a new social logic taking root. Control of resources means power. The stabilization of power means hierarchy. The most spectacular material evidence of this process still stands. What tourists see today at Stonehenge is only a frozen cross-section of its final form. Its history is older, stranger, and in some ways harder to explain than most people realize. Stonehenge was built over roughly 1,500 years in at least 3 major phases, involving different materials, different modes of social organization, and possibly very different purposes. And even before it, this land had already been made meaningful by human presence. Archaeologists found 3 post holes made from pine posts in the car park area along Stonehenge's main axis. Dating places them around 8,000 to 7,000 BCE, the period when Mesolithic hunter-gatherers were active, nearly 5,000 years before the stone circle was erected. These posts were over 70 centimeters in diameter and were deliberately set upright, not the traces of fallen trees. Their alignment has been argued by some researchers to point to specific astronomical positions, though this remains disputed. Whatever the function, one thing is clear: before farming arrived, before anything we would call civilization appeared, the Salisbury Plain already held special significance for a group of hunter-gatherers, important enough to mark with massive timber posts. The sacredness of a place is older than the state itself. People assume Stonehenge represents the masterpiece of an agricultural civilization, but beneath it lies a deeper layer belonging to earlier hunter-gatherers. History is not a straight line, but a stacking of social forms on the same ground. The first formal construction phase of Stonehenge, around 3000 to 2900 BCE, was mainly a circular earthwork enclosure of bank and ditch, about 110 meters in diameter, a classic hangar. This already required organized collective labor, likely hundreds of people cooperating for months, people who had to be coordinated, supplied, and managed. That kind of capacity does not arise spontaneously. It implies that a power structure beyond small mobile bands already existed. The second phase introduced the bluestones, one of Stonehenge's most persistent mysteries. Their geological source has been identified as the Preseli Hills in West Wales, roughly 250 kilometers away in straight-line distance. How multi-ton stones were moved from Wales to Salisbury Plain without wheels or metal tools remains a topic of experiments and debate. The most common explanation combines wooden sledges, rollers, rope, and water transport. Some recent work also argues for glacial transport, suggesting ice may have moved some stones closer long before humans did. Whatever the method, the key point is that selecting a specific source region and transporting stone over such distance implies a broad knowledge network and cross-regional organizational capacity. The bluestones were not the cheapest local option. They were an intentional, costly choice, and that cost itself functions as a display of power. Why bring stones from 250 kilometers away has no simple answer, but chasing it always leads back to social organization and authority. The third phase brought in the sarsen stones that define Stonehenge's iconic outline today. These sandstone megaliths came from the Marlborough Downs, about 32 kilometers away, with the largest exceeding 25 tons. Raising them and placing multi-ton lintels on top required careful measurement, complex scaffolding, and enormous labor. Experimental archaeology suggests that moving and erecting the stones alone could demand hundreds of people working for years. The fine finishing on the stone surfaces, mortise and tenon joints, carving and polishing shows that specialist craftspeople were involved. These were not simply ordinary farmers pulled in briefly. In a meaningful sense, they were professional laborers partly detached from direct food production. Specialists must be supported. Supporting specialists requires surplus. Managing surplus requires power. That logic chain is written clearly into the stones. When a society can sustain people who work long-term, not to directly feed themselves, hierarchy and rule stop being abstractions and become daily structure. Stonehenge was not an isolated monument. Around it lie hundreds of round barrow burials, the avenue ceremonial pathway, and nearby sites like Woodhenge and the massive enclosure of Durrington Walls. Durrington Walls is one of the largest Neolithic enclosures in Britain, roughly 480 meters across. Archaeology there has uncovered abundant feasting remains, pig bones, cattle bones, charred grains, suggesting periodic large gatherings and communal meals. Some scholars estimate that each event could have drawn thousands of people from across Britain, consuming far more food than local populations would need day to day. That implies Stonehenge and its landscape formed a ritual center with regional pull, able to attract, organize, and provision people from far away. That capacity is not something a single village or family can produce on its own. It requires some kind of supra-community authority structure, even if it lacked the title of king, the form of a palace, or written records. Thousands of people showing up to eat on schedule implies supply chains, mobilization, and durable networks. It turns power from an abstract word into a practical question: who can make that many people arrive, and make sure they get meat? Stonehenge's astronomical alignment, winter solstice sunrise and summer solstice sunset on two axes, suggests precise observation of the sky, encoded into architecture. Whoever controls the calendar controls the most important production rhythm of an agricultural society. Knowing when to sow and when to harvest is a form of real power. Making that knowledge concrete in a permanent stone structure that required huge collective labor is also a declaration: we are the custodians of this knowledge, the ones who make the seasons legible. The state had not yet been born, but the embryo of priest-chief authority was already taking shape under the megalithic shadows of Salisbury Plain. Those who control the timetable control power. This was true then, and it is true now, even if today the timetable has become institutions, billing cycles, and algorithms. Power leaves stone on the surface, and its cost to ordinary people is written into bone beneath the soil.